Welcome to Navigating Hope, your compass to health empowerment. I'm Dr. Jaime Hope, steering you through healthcare, overcoming overwhelm, personal goals, and emergencies. We'll navigate the healthcare maze with actionable insights and real-world advice, unlocking the secrets to a healthier, more vibrant life. Join us to take control of your well-being and make informed decisions for your health and your future. Stay with us as we unravel the mysteries of medicine, wellness, and life's unforeseen challenges, helping you bypass the ER with a dose of knowledge. Stay tuned till the end of the episode with a recap of your actionable insights and a free gift. Let's chart a course to your well-being together. Hey everybody, welcome back to Navigating Hope. Today's show is packed with inspiration, innovation, and some seriously cool tech meets heart vibes. So I'm really excited to introduce you to Chia-Lin Simmons. She is a tech powerhouse who's spent over 25 years building and leading some of the biggest names in the business. Things you've heard of such as Google, Audible, Samsung, you name it. And today she's the CEO of LogicMark, where she's transforming how we support people who care for others with smart, life-saving technology. Oh, also, she's a lawyer, founder, inventor, and major advocate for women in tech. Wow, that's there are just so many things. Chia-Lin, we're so thrilled to have you with us here today. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm really pleased to be here.
And so I love that the technology, you've taken all these, skills and background and have a technology that is specifically for caregivers. There are many people who are listening, and myself included, who are taking care of an ill or elderly loved one. And boy, we need all the help we can get. So I'd love to start with your origin story. What got you excited to enter the tech space and that whole journey in the first place?
Yeah, so I've always been a little bit of a geek growing up, and so I've always loved technology and the things that it does to transform the way that people live their everyday lives. I mean, I really see technology as a way to enhance everything that we do, hopefully benevolently, right? And so that really started my journey more than 25 years ago. And throughout, I've always looked for technology that is really directed towards consumers. And I'm not saying that they're big things that radically change everything, but certainly, hopefully, the items I worked on and the products I've worked on make people's days a little bit better. And that's also partly the reason why I actually ended up at LogicMark as well here. And mainly because I am one of those caretakers in the world. I'm the more than half of Gen Xers out there. And I think it's like 1 in 3 millennials are also sandwich generation caretakers as well. Yeah.
And so you looked at this, so caregiving, truly, this is not a rare instance. There are so many of us in that boat. So you took your technology background and you looked at the tasks of caregiving and how did that alchemy work for this?
So, like a lot of folks who end up being founders, or in my particular case, I'm a pivot CEO for a small microcap public company on the NASDAQ. You draw a lot of your own experiences in terms of why you're interested in technology, a certain technology, and why you want to go to a company. And in my particular instance, a couple of things drew me to this company. First and foremost, as I mentioned, I'm a caretaker. And so the instance that was kind of burned into my head was that my mother-in-law had been visiting us at the time, and my father-in-law had passed. And so they were living in a 2-acre home. And so my husband and I live in another state. So we were very worried about her. So she very kindly allowed us to convince her to wear a medical alert product. And so she came out to visit us. And then while we were sitting down at a ramen restaurant in Oakland, she sat down a little too quickly, and immediately her device goes off and it screams out, "Mrs. Becker, are you okay?" And this lovely woman was just mortified, and everybody turned and looked at her, and it was like something out of a movie. And at the back of my mind at the time, I filed away and thought, gosh, something really needs to be done about these. These devices don't work very well. They have really horrible fall detection. Like, this is not, somebody's got to fix that. And then sort of moved on. And so when an opportunity came in 2021, I looked at this company and I thought, my gosh, well, here's my opportunity. The universe is speaking, and there's an opportunity to sort of fix something that I had filed in the back of my mind and thought this needed to be fixed. But most importantly, that I was one of that sort of more than half of Gen Xers out there that was hoping to look after somebody who was far away, but also the industry is ripe for disruption. It hasn't really changed since the days of the I've fallen and can't get up. And I remember seeing those ads when I was growing up. And so I back in my mind, I thought, gosh, like it needs to be better than a remote control, like hanging around your neck and looking just like that as well. And most importantly, there's 10,000 people turning 65 and over every day. And of that 65 and over, one in four of them will fall. And so what can I do to help change that dynamic? And I am a geek enough that when I see something that's a problem to solve, then I'm immediately drawn to it. So.
And I love that. So as an ER doc, I see them after the fall, of course. And what led me to this is being the frustrating fact that in many instances, if some steps had been taken upstream, they wouldn't need to be there with the broken hip or the worst day of their life kind of thing. So I love that you are putting that in you found a real problem. This is not a small problem, and working on solving that. So how does it work? How can this technology, because sometimes the older person might be intimidated by it. The younger people might not be sure. There's a lot of concern. So how would you walk somebody through this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've talked about, putting caretakers in a center because, what we are trying to do as caretakers is what I would say allow the people we love to fly, but wanting to put a little safety net under them, right? And so that's kind of a little bit of what we do. And so with medical alerts, what it really looks is ensuring that the products are connected. And what we deal with things like what I call reactive technology. So how do we become better at reactive technology? So getting people the help they need within the golden hour. So I don't need to explain that's not my area of expertise, that's yours. And so we heard about the golden hour and we're like, we need to deliver people as quickly as possible so they're not lying there for hours upon, time. So how do we create better fall detection technology, better methodology to discern really what's let's call it sort of false positives, right? So a lot of technology for medical alerts, including the iWatch out there, for example, are running on, not to geek out here, like an accelerometer. An accelerometer is basically detects speed. So what they're trying to do is say like you're moving really fast and then you stopped. And so therefore that must be a fall. And the geek in me says like, gosh, everybody will tell you like you need more than one point of data to discern if something is real. So like
Yeah, what if
what
I'm just trying to do burpees and exercise and it's alerting my friends?
Exactly. And that's really one of those things where that's really not enough. So trying to put in additional sort of parameters around like how to figure out what's a fall. And so our technology from an algorithm perspective uses more sensors and we look at other methodologies. So for example, our new Freedom Alert Max, it actually has, advanced algorithms. So it's trying to figure things out. And it's doing things that way by saying there's apps linked to your caretakers. And we talk a little bit about that, right? And so the caretaker could actually look in and say, oh my gosh, that is really a fall. And so whenever we see this sort of pattern and we know that it's a fall because they're able to sort of peep in via video, like, oh my God, mom's on the floor, I got to go get her, then that is a validated fall. And so now we're looking for similar patterns, right? And so that's relevant because we really want to be great at reactive technology, which is get people help that, immediately when they need it the most so they have better health outcomes. But what we really are excited about is how do we then look at the patterns of your life and these types of sort of like speed, algorithmic sort of details and say, gosh, you had one fall and this is kind of what happened. And so when we see a sort of change in pattern of X, Y, and Z, this may be a probability for a potential fall in the future. And so now we're getting into the territory of where AI and ML really work well, which is predictive technology. How do we prevent the next fall? Right. And so we all know in many ways, or maybe people don't, that when you have a first fall, now you're less likely to want to walk, right? Because you're scared. So that means that you were like a 10,000 step walker, but now you're suddenly five. So our interest is to make sure that, you're maybe have physical therapy and they're telling you that you need to do like 10,000 steps a day still, even though you're scared and you need to use a walker, but you're suddenly down to five, or you went from like 10 to like eight because you're nervous and then now you're like down to five. So that pattern change is something that we should alert, your family and loved ones, caretakers, but as well as something that that data could be shared then with a professional, right? And say, like, we're
Oh,
seeing this change.
yeah, I mean, that's huge because the less active you are, the more muscle weakness you get, which then increases your fall risk. So
Exactly.
all of those different things and that fear of falling and that prevents the action, then the weakness, and then nearly guarantees the additional fall. I love that you're doing that predictive technology. That is really important.
Yeah, and we think that there's multiple factors as well related to trying to get a better feel for whether or not things are actually a fall, not a fall, and whether or not they're predictors for a fall. And so, for example, as we're moving forward, you'll see us launching things potentially like a medicine reminder. And so I can't tell you how important that is that you're mediterrant, for example, if you have high blood pressure and you don't take it, perhaps you're more dizzy and you're more at risk for a fall. So when we see some of that data trickle through with patterns of change in terms of movement and all of these things, again, they build a story about who you are, and we're talking about really hyper personalized care and monitoring. But what we'll also do is to say, like, when we see this pattern for a 65-year-old woman who has high blood pressure and diabetes, we will sort of then take that digital twin within our ecosystem and then compare it to an aggregate of people with similar profile. And we say, hey, when we last saw this type of pattern where they miss pills like or they didn't respond to pill taking three times, and like they went from a 20% differential for like walking patterns. What happened to this cohort of people? And maybe you'll tell us like percentage wise, like, within 3 months, like 20% of them had a fall. 6 months, 40% of them had a fall. So we can then take that data and say, hey, just when we see this pattern, this is sort of the percentage of like, then something occurred. So do you want to take this as, you know, families and loved ones and take it to the doctor and say, how do we get ahead of this? Because there is a potential probability increase of a fall. So do we put a walker? Do we put assistive devices in the home to basically help that next fall not occur? And so it's a little bit of, again, the aggregation, the more data we know, like for example, if we could hook up with blood pressure sensors, partner with those folks, then we can actually use that data to help make that analytics. And that's important. Like every device out there wants to gather data, and they all have an app nowadays, but their data sitting in like isolation. And so we're asking the doctors in one point in time to say like, yeah, like I saw this high blood pressure and I saw this blood glucose and I saw X. And then we're supposed to sort of say like that should help you. But maybe it's better for us to be able to sort of bring this aggregation and be able to share that trending data together with your movement, together with your emergency, experiences, and then put them together so that we can actually deliver that to a professional health taker, health provider to say like, this is actually the trending data. Right. And you don't have to, as a doctor, go and look for 6,000 pods of data, right? You're actually, it's an aggregate brought together in, in a percentage change, right? That's the relevant data. It's not necessarily that it's, you know, this to this, right? But it's actually like there was a drop in or up in change, right? And that's the trending data is really what's important, we think.
I mean, I fully agree. And getting those predictive things that when you've got that aggregate data and you can say, you are moving toward this risk factor because as you mentioned that gives many opportunities for the caregiver to look around the home, remove throw rugs, which are terrible if somebody is a trip risk, cords, all of those really helps give people that push to take the grab bars, walkers, but also to go to the doctor and say maybe we need physical therapy, balance training, strength training, fall prevention training, all of those things that can help keep our loved ones from having that fall. And so I love that you're doing that aspect. And also, if they do fall, because I have also seen that very horrific thing where they're on the floor for hours or day or longer, nobody wants their loved one in that situation. So utilizing data and AI, I mean, this is life saving for people. I don't know if all of our listeners understand After a fall, particularly a hip fracture, the mortality within a year is 85%. Not from the fracture itself, but the downstream consequences, urinary tract infections, bed sores, dementia, repeat hospitalizations. It is a big deal. And so it saves a life by preventing this. This is so awesome. I'm a nerd too. I'm geeking out on this.
I mean, I love that you share that data because I do think that such a, I mean, there's such a lack of sort of data knowledge among people about how important and why it is because so many people who are aging, the reason why they don't want to wear like a medical alert product is that it's twofold. One, it's like, who wants to have a visible symbol that you're getting older? And so those devices make them feel like they're not part of, the sort of active community. And so I totally understand that. And so for us, like we actually, our new Freedom Alert Plus looks like a very cool smartphone. And the kind of, it's like a smart, like, Zoolander concept of like, the cool little smartphones, not like the ginormous honking one. And so if you wear it, no one's like, oh my gosh, like that looks like a remote control. It literally looks like you're just carrying a really cool, smart cell phone. And then two, I would say that, they're worried about privacy. At the end of the day, like when you're older, you don't want to be the kid to your kid, right? And you don't want them to be peeping in all the time. It just feels really intrusive. And so, like, you're an adult. You don't need another adult running your life. You've earned it. And so for us, the technology allows for, the family to coordinate, the apps coordinate who's on call. And like the video cam sort of check in can't happen because you just randomly want to pop in and say like, hey mom, like I just want to see if you're like up and going. Like the only way that you can use that video cam product is when, your parent triggers the alert, your mom's like pushing a button or there was a fall detected and she didn't, like it was, God forbid, a false alarm, but like, she didn't sort of turn it off. And so that's the only way you could peep in. And so, and validate. And so, we feel like we're trying to ensure giving peace of mind to the caretakers, but preserve privacy for those who are being cared for and create what we call a care village. Because at the end of the day, like all of us need somebody to be part of our lives to make our lives better. And I grew up in a three-generational household. Like there was always an adult like ready to be like, hey, stop doing that, like an aunt or uncle. And then our grandparents lived with us. And so when you turn 16, you drive grandma to the doctors like it was your turn, right? And, we live in one nuclear sort of family nowadays, but we can all use technology to build ourselves a care village. And that could be the neighbor across the street because your mom lives in another state, your sister who lives 3 hours away, and then your son who lives like, 3 states away. But together we can combine to be quote on call, but also have the home, like the security of knowing that if I'm in a tunnel and my cell phone suddenly doesn't work, that there's a 24/7 monitor service that's US based, and then 911. So it's a triple protection. And that's where we want to deliver to all of our customers that sort of sense of security because, again, that's sort of the beauty of being a tech executive is because so many of us are really, I think, customers of our own product. We feel the pains, and that's what we build.
That's like all the good founders I've ever talked to are like, because they had a real emotional connection to it, see, identify a legitimate problem. And you talked about those. I mean, dignity. There are many indignities with aging. And so everything we can do to preserve that, I think is so key. And that the indignity and the fear of loss of independence, I have seen many times in my patients, make them reluctant to utilize technology or assistive devices, walkers, grab bars, not realizing by using them, they're preserving their independence. So really kind of reframing that conversation with a tool that is so you can clearly tell that you took the time to respect and understand the person and the caregiver's journey. Because I would be tempted to peep in on my loved ones like all the time, and that would annoy them endlessly.
Too. But we all talked about internally, and it was a really big focus that, there are multiple parties within this sort of ecosystem. And so everybody needs to be in a place where they feel comfortable utilizing those. And, the camera, like we are even looking at things that, I think the statistics is correct. So, but hopefully nobody will hold me to this, but I believe 50% of falls, for example, happen in the bathroom, in a shower, for example. And so, you'll be looking at us, looking at things that are there ways that we can, you know, manage and get people help if they're there, right? Because often you're not going to wear these devices in a shower. We have products that can go into the shower, but the reality is that, it's clunky and that's one place where you definitely don't want a video. And there's that's one place where like things get wet and they don't work as well. So what are the ways to sort of manage that? And so you'll see us also looking at solutions from that sort of perspective as well. So.
Yeah, you're really looking at all the different aspects of this. Yes, shower, bathroom, getting up out of bed, those common places are a legitimate problem. And if we've had it in many instances where a patient falls and they can't go reach the tech, they didn't put it on, they've not reaching it. And so just continuing to look at all of the different potentials. And I like that you have more than one device. If this is not a one size fits all, because if there was one perfect solution, of course, everybody would do it.
That's definitely true. I mean, I will say that one of the learning things that was very humbling for me is that, look, I'm 52 years old and I wasn't quite my daughter's generation where they expect everything to be touchscreen. But I also sort of took it for granted that directionally everybody wants to go touchscreen. And so that is actually super not the case. And as much as I jokingly talk about like a remote control with a big button on it, there are people who just love the button, right? And so this ease and simplicity of it, not a screen, not things that are just easy, right? One button and you're set. And so we do have a product that's miniature and small and has a big button on it, still has the fall detection, still has the feature from the caretaker app where all of our sort of mini Freedom Alert, all of our connected devices on a forward-looking basis have the capability to do geofencing because I actually live in somewhat of a retirement community area near a golf course, and silver alerts go out all the time. And so we actually have a feature that allows the caretakers to set a sort of geographic parameter, like a little, geo circle, so that if your loved ones were wandering out from that geo circle, that you actually get notification. Because again, that early wandering could be an indicator of many things, but you may find that like mom and dad on Tuesdays and Thursdays like wander out because they're doing their like park walks, which you want. So then we're kind of like, I'm not in trouble, right? Okay, so Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10, like, you know what? This is not an issue. Right. And so that's how we also get to personalized predictive care, which is like Tuesdays and Thursdays. We should not be like bothering you because you've already told us twice that like you're fine. You're not wondering. This is not a random thing, right? And so that is what we need to all get better at in this particular industry. So personalized care and monitoring.
And I find that very lovely. I don't feel like that would be an invasion of privacy, but more what works for you because you're right, wandering could be a predictor of early dementia and would help you want to safeguard them, but not feel trapped and not take away that independence and freedom, but keep them safe so they don't go somewhere unsafe, particularly on very cold days, which happen here in Michigan where I'm at, and very hot days, which we know are very risky to ill and elderly folks.
Absolutely. And again, our job is to also help learn, which is Tuesdays and Thursdays, right? If this is happening, then, the more we use the system and sort of participate together as a care village and as those that are being cared for and loved, like then we start aggregating that usage data, then we can actually then get to know you better and actually help so that it becomes less of a barrier and less Big Brother-ish. And again, I mean, there is some element where you're never going to super get away because you're getting remote monitoring. But I also look at it this way, right? Today, like, I have a home that has on, a home security system. And so, you know, I have for my daughter, like Astra safety product because, there's a lot of unsafe situations here. And so, there's ways every one of us, if you use a smartphone, there's ways to sort of make sure that people, as much as you can, are safe, right? And so for us, that concept of, somebody's not monitoring you among your family is it's kind of out the door nowadays, right? If you carry a smartphone, you're kind of in a world where your family members and a family plan will probably be able to see you. So.
Right. And I remember kind of just accepting that at a certain point, unless you want to go fully off the grid, there's really no way. And occasionally I hear, people with a conspiracy theory that the government is trying to implant Trackers, I pay for trackers. I'm literally wearing an Apple Watch, a Whoop, and carrying a phone. Like they don't need to hold me down and give me, I'm like, I'm giving them money for this. And so, since this is our reality, why not utilize it to the best? Like, this tells me if I'm getting sick, am I getting enough sleep? How's my stress? How's my heart rate variability? So, like, it knows where I'm at, but it's also teaching me how to maximize my health. So, taking our reality and using it to help save lives and prevent injury and illness. So, I agree. It's technology's here.
But our interest here is again that providing privacy side. So you'll see that we've spent some time building IP and things of this nature, but we look at things in what we call edge computing. So that means that, if we put a device into your home, that data processing is happening in the home. So if we see that you're down, right? Maybe the video capture will be like, oh, that person's prone. We're not taking a picture of you like lying on the floor and putting it in a cloud. Like we will probably just go in and say like describe the photo or like do a line drawing. I mean, remember the early days of, TSA where we walked through that machine and it was like getting like a MRI scan and I could see like everything and everyone's like, I really don't feel comfortable with that. And now it's just sort of like a line. So like for if you look at it this way, like a lot of what we do here, we're looking for things that are like outlines and patterns, and then we're processing that at the edge, and then we take that data of pattern differentials or like lines, and then we say like this is what we have, right? And we're not basically taking still pictures and putting it in a cloud where anybody can access it, right? Like that's just not what we're interested in. What we're interested in is like what have we generated enough data that we can process and understand so that we can keep you healthy? And anything extra is like, why would I want any of that information, right? So, like, really,
Yeah.
what I care about is you preserving your privacy and your data, but me getting enough of a pattern differential about your data to sort of basically say, hey, look, there seems to be a trending problem. I mean, there's data we have no matter what because we're an emergency response system. So when you're in a crisis, and I always bring this up because this is the one that it took me time to remember, but like I have family members who are on Coumadin. And so if they fell like in a state of panic, I am not going to remember all the meds they take, but the EMT is going to want to know if you had a fall and you're going to bleed out because you're on a blood thinner. So like these things like we have, and we'll share it with our 24/7 monitor service, and then we'll sort of remove it.
No,
And so
well, we love that. As the ER, if you fall, one of the first questions we ask besides the details of the fall is, are you on blood thinners? We want to know that very, very much. And for your patient, who your clients who are on blood thinners, teaching the family that a fall for them is much riskier than your average person. I'm shocked at how many people don't know that when they come in. They say, well, my mom fell 2 days ago and she's on a very strong blood thinner and now she's acting strange. And should have they didn't know, they weren't educated that they should have come in 2 days ago if she's been bleeding for 2 days. You know what I mean? So I love that you're using appropriate information, the respect for privacy, and the help, that you're finding that important balance. So what other questions do users of this and caregivers tend to ask you? Any other things that you've seen, kind of patterns in terms of understanding and utilizing the technology?
I think those are the major ones. It's typically around like for those who are being careful for, oh my gosh, preserving my privacy. And do these items have to be so clunky or do they have to look so not great? And so we feel like we typically have solved for those things, minimize the impact, all of those. And for the caretakers, what does it mean to be part of a care village? And so, one of the things that again, we talked a little bit about this, we talked about coordination. And so we really are very proud of this because, our own experiences is that there's often people who love this individual, but they live scattered across the board. So, they always want to know, like your caretaking app, like what does it really mean? I mean, beyond the sort of typical stuff that everybody puts out, for those who even bother to do it for a medical alert product, is that okay, you get notification. And don't get me wrong, notification is great, right? And so that's really single most important thing. And that's a standard. Everybody should have that. But then the question is, how do you help build a village? And so you saw us talk about care management and teaming. So that means that in our app, like you can put yourself on schedule. And so that means that like it's very difficult to be a caretaker. And I don't even have that experience of being somebody's sole caretaker or one of like a small team. And so if you have the opportunity to be able to sort of coordinate care so that, you don't have to be on call like 24/7 a day, and maybe like you can take that 3 hours and know that like, your sister who's maybe 3 hours away is on call so that you can actually shop with like some sort of level of security and know that like those 3 hours, like she's on calendar and everybody in the family knows, like there's five of you and like the next door neighbor too, and everybody knows that like she's on call. So if anything happens, like she's on call and she's the first sort of relative to be contacted, along with the, again, 24/7 monitor service is what we promise, right? Like, so it's there as well as a backup. But then at least you know that like sister's got it, she's on call, so I can shop with like sort of, relief and then come back and then I'm back on call for three, and all of those things can be really useful from a mental health perspective, as well as again making the entire team feel like they're part of a caretaking experience. And most importantly, like oftentimes like accidents happen, and so the person who's closest deals with it and then it's done, and then 6 days later you find out like mom had a fall. You're like, what? Like, I didn't know that. And so when you're part of this team, then you get the notification. You have the opportunity to do that. In the future, I would like to think that our platform could be more, which is, again, we care about physical health, we care about mental health, we care about financial health for people to age with grace. And so don't deal with the financial health stuff. That's very complex. But even portions of mental health, like our Freedom Alert Max actually has a crisis hotline embedded within it. And because ironically, what people don't know as much about is that there is actually a somewhat high percentage rate of suicides for the elderly. And so, they feel alone, they feel lonely. And so that is part of the system, and that's there, and it's wired to 988. And so we had originally actually had this, built in this idea for, of all people, the Veterans Administration. They're our biggest client, actually. We've been serving them since 2007. And, one of the things that they care about is mental health crises. And so, they asked us, are there things that you can sort of help us with? And we're like, yes, in fact, we can. And so Freedom Alert Maxes come with crisis hotline. And so it is one of those things that we think about, and these platforms actually help with it. And then, you again, as a family, you have the opportunity to know that this button was pushed, and boy, your family's in crisis, and so you can get to your family, right?
Yeah, that's amazing. It's inclusive because I've been in situations where I am the closest one to this loved one, or somebody else is if they're farther away, and that feeling involved. But if you are the closest one, you do need that respite because it does feel very 24/7. And then you're right about the suicides, particularly in veterans. Particularly, I think people forget that our elders do have a higher risk for suicide. The indignities, the loss of independence, the fear of being a burden, those things really do matter. So you're just looking at all of the different, kind of this holistic view of being a caregiver or needing a caregiver.
I think that, it's interesting when we see the evolution of like IoT connected devices and things that are being pushed. We see like first it was like, just your phone, and then it's like, your home securities, connected home, and even connected cars. I worked on connected cars, and those are like crazy engineering 7-year models, right? Like where it takes forever for them to get out of car. And so it's amazingly interesting, and what sort of prompted a lot of us to come work for this company is that there's a mission, and our mission was that like why is it that something that is about caring for our family is something that's so old school? And we're a bunch of geeks, and we're thought they're like, okay, well, so this industry really didn't come out of people who were technologists. They came out of people who were doing sort of fair easygoing like home security systems. You have like a monitoring service, that's your core, and it's great. Like you have, cameras and things like that, and you're keeping people safe, and that's so important. But then, that's not a DNA in innovation. And so what we hope that we're doing as a company is to bring sort of that concept of innovation and saying like, what do we need to do to basically disrupt this particular, experience so that all of us who are Gen Xers coming up and having technology in our lives, it becomes something that's, assisting us to help our family members, and versus like they're just sort of like, this isn't interesting. Like we're more interested in things for 20 somethings than 30 somethings. when really the impact here is like your 30 somethings and your 50 somethings, like we're a huge population. And so we're just not, this is not a sexy area that people are like, I really want to do tech here, but we're doing sexy tech around AI, IoT, edge processing, but just, again, somewhat different than a typical sort of tech industry concept, which is, we really grok on this new tech. And so then we're going to look, we're going to build it and we're going to look for product market fit. I love that because they always say that at every startup. It's like, we built this and we're now going out for like product market fit. And then really as a human centric, empathetic CEO, my job is to say like, wow, well, what's the problem in the world that I want to solve? Right. And then saying, like, this isn't just about what's a problem today, but what do I foresee 1 year, 3 year, 5 years out? And not to geek out in sports, but I was like, it's kind of like Wayne Gretzky. Like, he's a good hockey player because he doesn't skate to where the puck is today. He's skating to where he thinks it's going to go so that he could be successful. And so that should be our jobs as technology executives to basically think in a consumer focused way, solving problems that exist and we know will, come up in the next few years versus, we get super excited about tech and then now we're going to build a whole industry around it.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, you're really doing it the right way. It's human centric, it's people centric. You clearly understand, we've had many guests on this podcast kind of addressing the various issues that caregivers face. And then one interesting thing, so we had a guest who was teaching us about personal safety, more so directed toward the younger generation. We're out there, we're in, parking garages, as you mentioned. I love the caregiver technology, but you also have something that I could use if I'm in a dark parking garage. I'm going to stick them all over, my kids, my niece, all that. So before we wrap this up, can you tell us about the Aster button and how that you're just using additional cool ways to help keep all of us safe?
Yeah, I mean, it's really funny because we didn't actually start off thinking that we are going to give personal safety to everyone. We were basically taking a hardware company and making a connected company. And with the platform, we wanted to help, the aging population. And then we're like, well, but nowadays, if you're 65, like you're super active, right? And so, like, you're already carrying a smartphone. So, like, what do we do? And so, actually, Aster came out of this idea. But then we really started thinking about it and thinking, this could be applicable to all of us. Especially as women, I think we're now slightly more than 50% of the population. And I jokingly tell people that when I used to walk in a dark alley to my parking spot, I would put keys behind, like between my fingers. And now everything's a key fob. So how the heck am I protecting myself? Right. So I have nothing to stab somebody with in case they came and attacked me. And so then how do I keep myself safe? And so that's where Aster came out, which is that we already were doing part of this back-end technology work. So then the question is, how do we actually build it to the way that people actually use it today? And the thing that really resonated with us is that there was a young woman who was murdered on University of Georgia campus. And there was a US, I think it was like a Good Morning America interview with the student population. It was actually a young gentleman, a young male student who was like, well, the university gave us safety apps, but I can't unlock my phone and do all of these things and like, fight off somebody, right? And it really made me think a lot about like, well, the technologies today require you to do a couple of things that is sort of an antithesis to how we need to operate. So first and foremost, like you got to remember, like, yeah, unlock your phone and then do the, emergency device, right? That seems kind of like silly unless you have pre-planning. And yes, as women, before we step out anywhere, like we're pre-planning, we're like, what's my route? Here's my keys. And like, how quickly can I get in my car so that, I can run, like all those things. And we do pre-plan, but there's the young do not pre-plan. Well, like my 16-year-old does not pre-plan, and when she goes off to college as an 18-year-old, leaving the library at 12, hopefully, instead of a party, then she will not pre-plan. And so I don't, so I can't, she won't always remember to, unlock her phone, start the app, and get it going. right? And so, what do we need to navigate around that? And it's harder to do as a technology thing to do that. So, there's a lot of products out there that claim to do that, but they don't, right? And so, that's one of the first things we tackle, which is people are not going to remember to launch their app. So, what do we need to do to deal with it? We're a hardware software company. So, what kind of like product do we need to get into the hands that's like really easy to use? And so, those are the things that kind of were the genesis. And so, like, and also, like, I was a sorority woman and we had sober sisters. And so we used to like not drink and hang out as a little pod and then wait for somebody to call us. And then we go pick them up and like take their car home. And so I think about all of those sort of instances of what happens in different types of environments. And we start building the technology around that. And so now today, our app to Aster product, allows you to push the button, and so long as you have the phone and the product installed and you sort of put the proper, authority on it, then we can actually, get you help as quickly as you need it. I want to tell, and this is not me, so my husband hearing this, well, if you're going on a Tinder date, right? You don't know who that Tinder date is. And so maybe you want to basically tell your like sorority sisters, hey, like I'm on a date. So if I don't notify and sort of cancel the notification within 2 hours, like I'm in trouble. And then so it'll send a text and be like, hey, like you haven't checked in. And you're like, hey, I'm fine. I was just like, was having lots of fun. And then so that's fine. But if you don't, then they get triggered, they get sent your location, as does our 24/7 monitor service, which then gets you help, right? But we also need to make things small and easy. And so, like, some of these things are big. And so you kind of have to put it on a keychain, but it's kind of big. So, like, this is what we have. This is how small it is. It's literally the size of an air tag. It almost looks like an air tag. This is actually an accessory you can buy on our service because just generally, like if I'm going out on a run, like I'm gonna have my big iPhone in my like running jacket. And so I'm not like an emergency. Where am I gonna like my emergency button should be super easy to use. Candidly, the Cleary Center tells you that there's like 6,000 rapes a year on campus, right? And so only 15% is stranger danger, as I call them, right? The rest is like date rape, things like this. And so if you're in a situation and your phone is like in your bag and you're in a room and you're saying no, maybe this is on your wrist because I mean, I'm kind of like, or it's in your hair. And we can actually even put this in a small, like a scrunchie that's kind of got a zipper on it. But then you're able to sort of push that button and get help that you need. Right. Like these are things, again, like you have to walk through all of the user scenarios and say, like, how does danger manifest itself and how do you build something to sort of make that fit? And how do we help them in a way that is tailored to how they live versus asking people to sort of move their life and change how they like act and live in a world to work with the technology. Our job is to fit our technology to their daily use, not the other way around.
And that makes a lot of sense, particularly if your attacker, the first thing they do is going to want to separate you from your phone anyway. So even if you are trying to call for help, it's like, do I fight back or do I call? What's the right? But right, I assume they're not going to take my scrunchie, right? But so you've really, by understanding the user experience in these situations, in a fall, in somebody's pattern changing towards a fall, in our active older adults are wandering or needing safety, in all of us, I mean, just so many ways to be safer. Chia-Lin, thank you so much for what you do. Honestly, like I'm truly grateful for you've taken your tech brain, all that geeky energy, and taken your passion to really make a very big difference in helping save lives.
And thank you. It's a wonderful place to be. I feel like I get everything back and then some. It's really fun to be working on technology that's relevant. I mean, I love things like cryptocurrency. I geek out on that kind of stuff all the time. But the reality is it's kind of its own thing and you don't see the immediate impact. And so there's something very, I think, wonderful to be able to finally work on tech that's really impactful to people's lives. I mean, we get customer emails back. I remember there was one where this gentleman had used our product 4 times. He had a heart attack 4 times and really made me sad. But I was like, you need to have it, like just make sure you keep it on all the time. Like, give us a call if you think there's any problem with it because you used it 4 times. So.
Wow. Oh my gosh. That's incredible. I know that I like your website. There's a lot of space for frequently asked questions and how do people do that. So what are the best places for our listeners to find you?
Absolutely. You can always find me with LogicMark. That's www.logicmark.com. You can reach me that way. And also you can find me on LinkedIn. So that's linkedin.com/C Simmons, CSIMMONS.
Excellent. And we will put those links in the show notes for everybody just to make a little technology easier so they can find you. Chia-Lin, thank you so much again for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Navigating Hope podcast. Today's guest, Chia-Lin Simmons, is a tech innovator, lawyer, inventor, and the CEO of LogicMark, a company transforming caregiving and personal safety through smart, compassionate technology. Her journey blends cutting-edge innovation with deeply personal purpose and the solution she is creating to save lives. Before we dive into the top takeaways, don't forget to grab your free resource, Red Flags, Green Flags, Tools for Evaluating Your Healthcare Providers. It'll help you choose trustworthy professionals who truly prioritize your patient care. Download it now in the link in the show notes. Without further ado, here are your top 5 takeaways. Number 1, caregiving technology must be human-centered. As both a caregiver and a technologist, Chia-Lin understands the emotional, physical, and logistical demands of caregiving. LogicMark's mission is to put dignity, privacy, and usability at the heart of smart tech, creating those solutions that support caregivers and care recipients alike. Number 2, from reactive to predictive, the evolution of care tech. While most alert systems are reactive, like do you remember those? I've fallen and I can't get up devices. LogicMark is developing predictive technology that uses AI and machine learning to detect subtle behavioral shifts, such as changes in step count or medication adherence that might indicate a future fall or medical crisis. Number 3, building the care village through coordinated apps. LogicMark's caregiver tools go beyond an emergency response. Their system allows loved ones to coordinate their schedules, receive alerts, and share caregiving responsibilities, even if they're far away from their loved one. This reduces burnout and helps families stay connected and informed, even from a distance. Number 4, privacy and dignity are non-negotiable. Many older adults resist technology due to fears of losing privacy or appearing old. Chia-Lin emphasized how their devices are designed to be sleek, discreet, and only activate features like cameras when a true emergency is detected, honoring autonomy while enhancing safety. Number 5, safety for every age. The Aster button for personal protection. In addition to elder care, LogicMark developed the Aster button, an ultra-compact wearable safety device for women, students, and runners. With one press, users can send their location to trusted contacts and emergency services, making personal safety accessible and practical in real-time scenarios. So whether you're evaluating care for a loved one or seeking peace of mind in your own life, it's essential to choose the right healthcare professionals. Download your free copy of Red Flags, Green Flags for evaluating healthcare providers to ask better questions, and click the links in the show notes to get access to all of these amazing opportunities, technologies, and guides. Remember, innovation is powerful, but it means the most when it helps people feel safe, respected, and supported. So stay hopeful, stay determined, and as always, keep navigating your journey with hope. Thank you for tuning into Navigating Hope with me, Dr. Jaime Hope. It has been an honor to navigate the realms of health and wellness with you today. Remember, in the journey toward a healthier life, knowledge is your compass. If you enjoyed our time together, please share, like, and subscribe to Navigating Hope. Join us next week where we'll continue to empower your health journey, arming you with the wisdom to navigate life's challenges and keep the emergency room in your rearview mirror.